They left her at dawn, because it was easier not to look at her in the daylight. The wagon slowed only once, just long enough for her sister to jump down and place the blanket around her shoulders, too thin for the cold, too late to change anything. No one said the words out loud, but everyone knew them. She was too small, too weak. Another mouth that would not survive the winter. The prairie did not forgive softness, and the trail had already claimed enough lives. So the wagon rolled on, its wooden wheels, cutting lines through the dirt like scars that would fade by nightfall, leaving her behind with the wind and the silence, and the certainty that she had been judged and found unnecessary. She did not cry, not at first. Crying wasted strength, and she had learned early that strength was something she possessed in smaller portions than most. Her name was Eliza, though no one had said it that morning, and she was 18 years old but looked younger. Her body slight, her hands narrow, her bones sharp beneath skin that bruised easily. She wrapped her arms around herself and waited for fear to come, crashing in like it always did. But instead there was only a strange stillness, as if the land itself were holding its breath. The Comanche watched from the ridge long before she ever sensed him. He was called Tall Shadow among his people, not because of his height alone, though he was massive, broad-shouldered, towering, but because when he stood still, the sun itself seemed to bend around him. He had seen wagons like hers before, seen what they left behind. The land carried those stories, and he had learned to read them the way others read tracks or smoke. A blanket in the dirt, a girl sitting too straight, as if posture alone might keep the world from swallowing her. He did not approach at once. The Comanche understood patience in a way settlers never did. He waited until the sun climbed higher and the wind shifted. Waited until she stood and tried to walk, her knees shaking, her body already betraying her. When she fell, scraping her palms, that was when he moved. Eliza heard the sound before she saw him, the slow, deliberate crunch of boots against earth. She turned, heart hammering, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. He was enormous. Not just tall, but built like the stories men told around fires when they wanted to sound brave. His hair was dark and long, braided neatly, his chest bare and marked with scars that looked earned rather than decorative. He carried no weapon in his hands, but everything about him said he did not need one. She expected him to speak, or shout, or take something. Instead, he stopped several paces away and simply looked at her, his gaze steady, unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, calm, like distant thunder that promised rain rather than danger. "You are alone," he said. She nodded because denying it felt pointless. "They said I wouldn't make it." He studied her again, not with cruelty, but with assessment. He saw her thin wrists, the way her shoulders sloped inward, as if she had spent her life trying to take up less space. He saw how she stood anyway, how her chin lifted just a fraction, defiance flickering where fear should have been. "They were wrong," he said. Those words broke something open in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but confusion. No one had ever said that before. He stepped past her then, bending easily to pick up the dropped blanket, dusting it off with hands that looked capable of splitting trees. When he placed it back around her shoulders, he did so gently, as if she were something fragile but worth protecting. He did not ask if she wanted to follow him. He simply turned and walked, slow enough that she could keep up if she chose to. Eliza hesitated only a moment before going after him, because whatever waited behind her was death, and whatever walked ahead carried certainty in every step. The cabin began as an idea, then a promise. Tall Shadow chose a place near the river where the ground was firm and the wind less cruel. He cut the first tree with an efficiency that left her staring, each swing of his axe deliberate, powerful, controlled. Eliza tried to help, dragging smaller branches, stacking stones, doing what she could with the strength she had. When she apologized for being slow, he shook his head. "Small does not mean useless," he said. "Small means careful." No one had ever framed it that way. As the walls rose, log by log, something else began to take shape. Inside her, a sense that she was not a burden here, not an afterthought. At night, she slept near the fire while he kept watch, the stars wheeling overhead. And for the first time since she could remember, She was not afraid of morning. Before the cabin was finished, winter announced itself early. Snow dusted the ground like ash, and Eliza woke one morning coughing, her chest tight, her body betraying her again. Tall Shadow lifted her without hesitation, carrying her inside the half-built shelter, wrapping her in furs, feeding her broth until warmth returned to her skin. He sat beside her all night, saying nothing, his presence steady as the walls he was building around them both. By the time spring came, the cabin stood complete, solid, warm, unmistakably real. And so was the truth Eliza had begun to understand. She had not been saved because she was pitiful. She had been chosen because she mattered. The first thing Eliza learned, after surviving, was how to live without apologizing for it. The cabin changed everything. Its walls did more than keep out the wind. They held space for her to exist fully, without shrinking herself to fit someone else's expectations. Tall Shadow never spoke of ownership, never treated her presence as charity. He showed her how to set snares, how to recognize edible roots, how to listen to the land instead of fighting it. In return, she brought order to the cabin, cooking, mending, organizing the small world they shared with a care that made it feel like a home rather than a shelter. The nearby settlers noticed them eventually. Whispers traveled faster than rivers out here. A giant Comanche, a small white girl, a cabin built where no one thought one could stand. Men came to stare from a distance, curiosity tangled with judgment. Eliza felt the old fear rise in her chest, the instinct to hide, to make herself smaller again. But Tall Shadow stood beside her, unmoving, and something inside her steadied. "She stays," he said to anyone who questioned it. That was all. When trouble came, it came quietly. A sickness passed through the settlement, and Eliza insisted on helping despite the risk. She brewed teas, sat with fevered children, used the carefulness she had been given as a weapon against despair. When she fell ill again, weaker than before, it was Tall Shadow who carried her through the night, refusing to let the land take her back. "You are strong," he told her as she drifted between sleep and waking. "You just fight differently." She believed him now. By summer, the cabin had become a place people came to, not to judge but to ask. For help, for shelter, for advice. Eliza watched herself become someone others depended on, not despite her size but because of it. She noticed the way Tall Shadow looked at her then, not as something to protect alone, but as an equal presence rooted and real. On the day the settlers offered payment for the land, Tall Shadow declined. "It is already paid for," he said, resting his hand against the cabin wall. Eliza understood. The payment had been trust, survival, choosing each other, when the world had chosen to discard them. When autumn returned, Eliza stood outside the cabin, watching the sun sink low, her body still small, still delicate but unbroken. She had been left behind once. Now she was building a future.